Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you as always for stopping by. Obviously the big news yesterday was President's seemingly throwaway line, no deadline for China deal, could be better post-elections, and that sent everything into a tailspin. And took me back to an article I wrote a while back when I said the conundrum for those who wish to bet on the end of the world is this: however, what would be the point? The world would have ended. In that same article I was saying at that time there's certainly a fin de siècle, even apocalyptic mood afoot. And I quoted W.B. Yeats's The Second Coming, turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the centre cannot hold. Mystery buyer made huge options bet on gold hitting $4,000 an ounce. We're currently at 1,483 after a strong move higher as gold benefited from a risk-off move. The price of precious metal gained more than 1% in tandem with the fear index VIX, which jumped by 16%, all on that presser that President Trump said, "I don't watch the stock market," which is patently false, as Northman Trader tweeted. And I wrote about this on the 11th of November, saying the bots will be waiting for Santa Claus and a Christmas rally, so President Trump is wont to tweet, "Stock market up big today, a new record, enjoy." So a complete turnaround by Trump. Practically every trading day now and for over a year, Trump recycles the same headline. The latest iteration, Trump says China trade talks moving very nicely. And I said this is a house of cards of simply monstrous proportions and has been bulked up with the steroids of free money, negative interest rates and quantitative easing. And I quoted, "Here we go round the prickly pear, here we go round the prickly pear at 5 o'clock in the morning." And I was also saying that it was within Xi's power to absolutely crash the US market by simply pronouncing no trade deal as possible, and the US stock indices will sink as far as they can. So here we have Trump preempting Xi and sent the equity markets down heavily, sent the markets into gold. And I'll come back to that issue in a minute, but let me take you through some home thoughts. The missing tooth of this lioness and a bloodied face tell the obvious story of a serious battle. Jambo magazine. One must imagine Sisyphus's friends popping on over and saying stuff like, "Man, I'm sorry you're still dealing with this rock situation, buddy." And indeed we are. Isn't our world an amazing place? The sun went down for the last time in 2019 at Sweden's northernmost point. The next time it will appear above the horizon will be in January. That's from Ulrika Modia. Large carnivores often walk along roads and tracks to avoid the wet dew on longer grass. This makes it easier for us to pick up their movements and keep a closer watch on where they are. That's Lion Landscapes. Political reflections. The owner of a mysterious number I. Investigators are trying to determine whether the unidentified phone number belongs to Mr. Trump, and said Representative Adam Schiff. The report detailed a game of phone tag between the I1 or I number and Mr. Giuliani on August the 8th. That's the report in the New York Times. So Trump says no deadline is on China trade talks. Might be better to wait until after the 2020 election. 9th of July 2018, I said tariff wars, who blinks first? James Dean was an iconic American actor who tapped into the universal yearning and angst of nearly every adolescent human being, with a raw connection that has surely not been surpassed since. In one of his most consequential films, Rebel Without a Cause, two players, read teenage boys, decide to settle a dispute, read teenage girl, by way of near-death experiences. Each speeds an automobile towards a cliff. A simple rule governs the challenge. The first to jump out of his automobile is the chicken, and by universally accepted social convention concedes the object in dispute. The second to jump is victorious, and depending on context becomes gang leader, prom king, etc. Buzz, the leader of a local gang, agrees to a chickie run. Both race stolen cars towards the edge of a cliff, and Jimmy jumps out an instant before the cars reach the edge of the cliff. Buzz, still unable to free his jacket from the door handle, fails to escape. While he won't be branded a chickie, he suffers a worse fate. The most important currency to watch is the renminbi, as I said on the 13th of August. And currently the renminbi is trading at 707.80. And this is from TradingView. And the renminbi is being used, as I wrote on the 26th of August, as a shock absorber and a very precise first responder to Trump. 27th of May this year, I was saying the China-US war could turn ballistic. I was also saying Trump is no longer the decider. In the US, there is clearly a consensus baseline for a full-on toe-to-toe slugfest, as it were. In China, there is only one decider, who was pronounced as much by Xinhua in a historical announcement in March 2018. Xi reckons he can direct a successful society-wide struggle in the trade dispute. Notwithstanding all the hyperbole and very partisan commentary, the following are the plain truths I wrote. The markets are still pricing in a benign, but much less benign than a month ago, outcome. And I asked, we need to consider what a non-benign or even maximum non-benign outcome looks like. The Financial Times asks, China in 2050, will it be a global player or split the world economy? Xi Jinping said, with a proud civilization spanning over 5 millennia, China will write a more brilliant chapter in our new journey toward the realization of the 2 centenary goals and the Chinese dream of great national renewal. The twin goals to be achieved by 2049 are the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, both economically and territorially, by reunifying with Taiwan. China is the world's largest trading nation in goods, according to McKinsey, and Chinese and Taiwanese companies account for more than a fifth of this year's global Fortune 500. Once dismissed as a copycat maker of cheap gadgets, China now rivals the US in technology, sparking a new arms race in areas such as artificial intelligence and fifth-generation telecoms networks. Technology is arguably at the center of the changing relationship between China and the world, wrote McKinsey. Scrutiny reflects the inconvenient truth Mr. Xi did not bring up in his anniversary speech. China's rise and modus operandi have created waves across the globe, threatening foreign relations and imperiling trade, tech, and capital flows. The big question for the future is whether it will backtrack and become an integrated part of the global economy, or whether the current decoupling will turn into a massive rift. This would create a two-gear world economy, much as has happened with the splinter net bifurcated between China and the rest of the world. An outright ban of Huawei would, many analysts argue, be an own goal, forcing China to ratchet up its efforts in self-sufficiency and cutting American players out of a 1.4 billion strong market, which is what China wields to tame global corporates. But caving in does not guarantee an open door. China has flexed its muscle in other industries such as airlines, hotels, and movie producers, all of which have been called upon to choose between acquiescing or rebelling. China's insistence on its sovereignty over the independently ruled island of Taiwan has snagged the likes of Marriott International. Hotel Group was accused of seriously violating national laws and hurting the feelings of the Chinese people when it listed Taiwan as a country in some online forums. It apologized and changed the forms. Others have been less swift to apologize, including the cartoon show South Park. The show's producers tweeted a fake apology following its Banned in China episode that satirized censorship in the country. They said, like the NBA, we welcome the Chinese censors into our home and our hearts. We too love money more than freedom and democracy. We good now, China? One question is whether bending to China's will can jeopardize business elsewhere, say from flocks of millennials spurning sneakers or movies from companies that make what they see as unpalatable choices. Accessing China's market may look less attractive if it means being shunned by an entire generation of consumers across the rest of the world. And that's the key point and key pivot point. I wrote about China turning 70 in early October. Longing on a large scale makes history, wrote Don DeLillo. These words streamed into my consciousness as I watched the celebrations in Tiananmen Square. Unity is iron and steel. Unity is a source of strength. Complete reunification of the motherland is an inevitable trend. No one and no force can ever stop it, he added. Today we know the Chinese economy is slowing, but Xi is relying on Chinese resilience. If there is a decoupling between the two economies, so be it. The Chinese people can endure more pain than the spoiled and hubristic Americans. 15th of October 2018, I was saying war is coming. This geopolitical contest will likely escalate dangerously. Powerful forces on both sides are driving the world's two strongest countries towards fully fledged confrontation. That was Douglas Dillon, professor of government at the Harvard Kennedy School. As a candidate, Trump complained that China was raping America, and after months of smaller steps, the administration is now pledged to fight back hard on all fronts. Rumors suggest that the new island's concrete is crumbling and their foundations turning to sponge in a hostile climate, says The Economist. I wrote about that. Apart from a few half-hearted and timid FONOPs, China has established control over the South China Sea. It has created artificial islands and then militarized those artificial islands across the South China Sea. However, B strain 1 doesn't make it better, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is PRC propaganda. Appear weak when you're strong, Sun Tzu or something. NATO alliance will respond to any attack on Poland or the Baltic countries. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, through the presence of NATO forces in Poland and in the Baltic countries, we are sending Russia a very strong signal. If there is an attack on Poland or the Baltic countries, the whole alliance will respond, he said before the NATO summit. I was writing about Macron's comments and disagreeing with his diagnosis that Europe's preeminent threat was militant Islam. And I said, Fortress Europe is already lost to the geopolitical grandmaster Vladimir and his bestie Xi Jinping, if that's what Macron is thinking. The Turkish President Erdogan landed in London for the NATO summit. Emmanuel Macron accused Turkey of working with Islamic State proxies. That's a prima facie case. The common enemy today is the terrorist groups. I'm sorry to say we don't have the same definition of terrorism around the table. When I look at Turkey, they're fighting against those who fought with us shoulder to shoulder against ISIS, and sometimes they work with ISIS proxies. They work with them all the time. Leaked video shows Trudeau with Emmanuel, Macron, Boris Johnson making fun of Trump's long presses and his staff reactions. That's via Joyce Karen. Taken to the brink by Trump, Gulf states are backpedaling on Iran, an expanded soccer tournament, a direct flight, clandestine meetings, and a pledge to release prisoners of war. Diplomacy is breaking out as Gulf Arab nations back away from a Trump-inspired confrontation with Iran, and the signs are everywhere. Spooked by the prospect of a catastrophic war with Iran and its proxy militias across the region, Gulf monarchies are in the midst of a strategic rethink. The U.A.E., whose economic model relies in large part on its international links, quickly realized it had most to lose from a military escalation. While the humanitarian catastrophe unleashed by the Yemen war trained an unwelcome spotlight on Saudi Arabia, it took a brazen strike on Saudi oil installations, which knocked out half the country's crude production, to ram home the risks and prove that Trump was not about to ride to his allies' rescue. The attack shattered any illusion of this magical US security umbrella, said David Roberts, an assistant professor at King's College London who studies the Gulf. It burst the bubble and showed that Iran had the willingness to both do something astonishing, like the attack on Aramco facilities, and had the capability to carry it out. Rolling back Iran's power remains a priority for the Sunni Gulf Arab leadership. I call them Arab NATO. There's an increasing recognition, however, that no one stands to gain from a military escalation in the world's top oil exporting region. In a November 10 speech, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs Anwar Gargash said he saw a path to a deal with Iran that all parties might soon be ready to embark on if Tehran demonstrated commitment. Imran Khan, elected with the backing of a powerful army that provides extensive support for the Saudi military, has shuttled between Tehran and Riyadh in October. The U.A.E. broke with the U.S. and Saudi Arabia by not naming Iran as the culprit behind attacks in May and June on oil tankers as they sailed toward the Strait of Hormuz. Don't you know that Iran is going to stay here and we will remain neighbors throughout history? He said. That was Hassan Rouhani. Trump will only be around for a few years and we will go back to whatever he was doing. 25th of November, I said if a civil war is ignited in the Shia Crescent and the nature of the hybrid warfare indicates that this is the direction of travel, the implosion will engender catastrophic consequences. Of course, Arab NATO, I wrote, which includes the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the GCC and Israel, is a lot more credible and they are surely guiding the inferno. But I said if the implosion that will engender catastrophic consequences which will be impossible to manage and which will surely imperil Arab NATO itself. After his mysterious death, the media scrambles to get its story straight about White Helmet's founder James Le Mesurier. This is Mint Press's Vanessa Beeley. And it's a very strange story. The White Helmets, I tend to agree with Vanessa's prognosis. They were a Western intelligence asset, in my view. In November 11, 2019, the British founder died in Istanbul. Circumstances surrounding his death immediately elicited a flurry of Turkish and corporate media reports, many of them contradictory, as the details of his final hours came to light. Mark Urban, the diplomatic editor at BBC Newsnight, immediately tweeted that a former colleague had told him it was impossible to fall from that balcony, referencing Le Mesurier's reported cause of death and intimated that there may have been state involvement. Urban did not identify his mysterious former colleague or explain what made him sufficiently qualified to conclude that Le Mesurier's death may have been a state-sanctioned hit. So you'll have to read that article, which has got 3 coming out on that point. Let's turn to currency markets. Euro dollar 110.77, dollar index 97.762, Japanese yen 108.50, Swiss franc 0.9867, the pound 129.96, the Australian dollar 0.6816, India rupee 71.76, South Korean won 1194.57, the Rial 420.54, better GDP numbers than the market expected, Egyptian pound 16.112, and the Rand 14.635, hanging in there after some dreadful GDP numbers I'll come to momentarily. Dollar index 97.762, and I think overall we are watching the rolling over of the dollar. Euro dollar, as I said, 110.76 last. Crude oil, last trading at $56.30. Obviously the OPEC plus meeting is key. Emerging markets were on the move in November with large drops across LATAM, the Chilean peso, which fell the most. Sentiment is split. Some argue it's still catching up with a weaker fair value, but let's have a look and keep an eye on it. But what you're seeing is a very quick transmission from the street and protests into these currencies. Brazil Q3 GDP was plus 0.6%, beating forecasts of plus 0.4%, and the highest since Q1 last year. Annual GDP growth was 1.2%, also beating forecasts of 1%. Coming to sub-Saharan Africa, climate change, drought cuts Victoria Falls to the lowest level in 25 years. I'll show you a photograph of it currently and one of what it typically looks like. The president of Zambia has warned of the risk of losing natural wonders like the Victoria Falls if action isn't taken soon on climate change. The Kariba Dam, the world's largest reservoir which straddles the Zambezi River upstream of the falls, is down to a quarter of its original capacity. Press statement from U.S. Ambassador Daniel L. Foote, U.S. Embassy in Zambia, very hard-hitting. The American people have provided more than $4 billion in HIV/AIDS support in the last 15 years, working closely with the Ministry of Health. We currently have well over 1 million Zambians on life-changing antiretroviral medicine, touching close to half of the families in the country, he said. By knowing your HIV status and being on treatment which prevents transmission, the only difference between HIV negative and HIV positive today is the medicine. Discriminatory and homophobic laws under the false flags of Christianity and culture continue to kill innocent Zambians, many of whom were born with the virus. Your citizens are terrified of being outed as HIV positive because of the inaccurate and archaic associations between HIV and homosexuality. My job as US Ambassador is to promote the interests, values and ideals of the United States. Zambia is one of the largest per capita recipients of US assistance in the world at $500 million each year. I was shocked at the venom and hate directed at me and my country, largely in the name of Christian values, by a small minority of Zambians. I thought, perhaps incorrectly, that Christianity meant trying to live like our Lord Jesus Christ. In 2016, the Pope said, when a person arrives before Jesus, Jesus certainly will not say, go away, you are a homosexual. In my 2 years, I've strived to improve the US-Zambia partnership with minimal success. Let us stop the facade that our governments enjoy warm and cordial relations. The current government of Zambia wants foreign diplomats to be compliant with open pocketbooks and closed mouths. Despite $500 million in an annual American debt-free support to the Zambian people, I have been granted exclusive bilateral audience with the President only 5 times in 2 years. Last week we rearranged my schedule and I'm somewhat busy administering $500 million in annual programs here to meet with the President on Friday. On Friday, State House told me to come Saturday, a day already filled with rescheduled meetings. That's not mutual respect. Both the American taxpayers and Zambian citizens deserve a privileged two-way partnership, not a one-way donation that works out to $200 million per meeting with the head of state. I've just reread Zambia's entire constitution, which I believe is an admirable document, and there is no reference to having sex against the order of nature or of homosexuality for that matter. Regarding the minister's denials over my comments about government officials stealing millions of dollars in public funds, the government always requests evidence of such misdeeds. Is that really the role of the international community? Dissenting opinions are certainly not shared by state-controlled media such as ZNBC, Zambia Daily Mail, and Times of Zambia. It's time to advocate for a real voice for all Zambians and uphold a person's right to freedom of conscience and belief. I wrote about Zambia briefly and previously, but on the 14th of October I said the canary in the coal mine is Zambia. Investors have lost faith in government promises to get spending under control, and the government has fallen out with the IMF as well. This is now turning into a perfect storm. 21st of January, I spoke about the mind game that ZANU-PF had played on its citizens, evaporating in a puff of smoke. Have a look at Stephen Saka, BBC Hard Talk, on the road to Zimbabwe, and it tells you the whole story. Emerson Mnangagwa, who was eulogizing Mugabe as a revolutionary icon, has failed and is frankly as untenable as his erstwhile mentor. 21st of January, I said what is clear is that Zimbabwe is at a tipping point moment, but it's taking a long time to play out. Vice News, Zimbabwe is trying to build a China-style surveillance state. It was on social media that Zimbabweans first found their voice to rise up against the 93-year-old strongman with platforms like WhatsApp, Facebook and Twitter. Now they're bringing a bill known as the Cybercrime, Cybersecurity and Data Protection Bill of 2019, was passed by Mnangagwa's cabinet last month and is currently being drafted for publication and approval by Parliament, where it's expected to easily pass under Mnangagwa's ZANU-PF party majority. It is a terrifying piece of legislation, said Bezekile Gumbo, a researcher at the Zimbabwe Democracy Institute. It does everything it needs to give ZANU-PF party and its agents in government the legal basis to imprison opponents using the internet. Definitions of crimes were described in such broad terms that they could arrest people because they have said something on a social media platform to criticize the government or say something that is unfair to the government. At the time, WhatsApp accounted for over 1/3 of all mobile data used in Zimbabwe. On the technology front, China is already helping the Zimbabwe government to keep a closer eye on its citizens. As part of Beijing's $71 million Belt and Road investment in the country, the Zimbabwe government has partnered with Chinese facial recognition company CloudWalk Technology to create a surveillance network similar to the one deployed to monitor Uyghurs in Xinjiang. The deal sees CloudWalk Technology monitoring major transport hubs and using the data to build a national facial recognition database. The deal also gives the Chinese company access to a rich trove of data on African faces. State-owned enterprises in Ethiopia owe $11.2 billion externally, while the federal government owes the remainder of a total of $27 billion, according to Addis Fortune. Take you back to July 2018, When Abiy said, he said we're in debt, we have to pay back, but we can't, and secondarily we aren't able to finish projects we've started, and that was when he announced his economic pivot. US to tap $60 billion war chest in boon for Huawei rivals. The US has been warning other countries not to buy telecoms gear from Huawei Technologies and ZTE Corp. The government will soon put real money behind the effort. A new agency called the US International Development Finance Corporation plans to tap some of its $60 billion budget to help developing countries and businesses purchase equipment from other companies. The US is very focused on ensuring there's a viable alternative to Huawei and ZTE. We don't want to be out there saying no, we want to be out there saying yes, Adam Boehler, the chief executive officer. US could bankroll Huawei alternatives through loans or loan guarantees to developing nations and companies, or even acquiring minority stakes in emerging makers of competing gear. The agency is charged with helping to advance US foreign policy by countering the growing influence of authoritarian regimes and expects to be fully authorized and funded by Congress in coming months. The real issue about Huawei is not China, it's security of data. We want to ensure that companies adhere to certain data security standards and the protection of people's information. Ethiopia is in the midst of privatizing its telecom industry and is auctioning spectrum and licenses. Vodacom, majority owned by British wireless giant Vodafone Group, is planning a joint bid with Safaricom. That is a live example we can play in, Boehler said. There are no US companies involved at this point, but the British are bidding. And here is a short clip of that article from Money Academy. I wrote about this on the 10th of December after that truce dinner went horribly wrong. And there I said Huawei is in the bloodstream of Africa's telecom infrastructure. How this plays out in Africa is now an above the radar issue. And it'll be interesting because Huawei is actually the telecom infrastructure for the continent. Cameroonian government rules out postponing general elections for February 2020. Government condemns all maneuvers that amount to blackmail and one-upmanship, they said. The yardstick for sporting prowess is talent. Most influential African World Cup champ Springboks captain Siya Kolisi. He really was a remarkable epitome of the Rainbow Nation redux, and really I find him tremendously impressive. GDP product shrank an annualized 0.6% compared with a revised 3.2% expansion in the second quarter. This is South Africa. The economy expanded 0.1% from a year earlier. The contraction means full-year economic growth, which hasn't exceeded 2% since 2013, could be even lower than the 0.5% projected by the Treasury in October. South Africa, for the entire first half of the year, I wrote on the 14th of October, real GDP amounted to 0.4%. My God, we're going to be at 0.4 max. Charlie Robertson says South Africa is headed for a jump downgrade. Mining was the biggest drag on growth, down 6.1%. South African all shares up 3.32% year to date. Dollar rand holding in there, the rand at 14.625. Egyptian pound 16.10. EGX 30 up 3.33% year to date. Yield on Nigeria's $1.5 billion of debt due August 2047 has risen 8 basis points to 8.29%, ahead of a possible new issue. Nigeria all share down 14.27% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange down 14.23% year to date. Kenya forcing importers to use costly new Chinese railway, businessmen say. This is a Reuters report via Duncan Miriri. Some importers said their transport costs shot up by nearly 50% when they used the rail due to extra fees, more time spent clearing goods at the congested Nairobi train depot, and the need to send a truck to collect the goods from there. Kenya Ports Authority has an obligation to feed the railway. We were the guarantors of the rail, said Daniel Manduku, head of Kenya Ports Authority. The vast majority of China's overseas spending has no detectable effect on economic growth, said Bradley Sparks of Aid Data. This is a revolution, lawmaker Muhammad Ali said earlier this month as demonstrators carried a mock coffin branded RIP China colonization in blood red letters. The contract between China's Exim Bank and the Kenya Ports Authority and Kenya Railways requires KPA to provide 1 million tons of cargo to the railway per year, rising to 6 million by 2024. KPA says rail cargo is expected to hit 5 million tons this year after more than 4 million last year. Mombasa is projected to handle 34 million tons of cargo this year. Most does not go by rail. Cargo destined for Mombasa or countries other than Kenya can still go by road. Moving a 40-foot container to Nairobi by rail costs $800, roughly the same as a truck. But importers must also pay another $250 for a truck to collect the goods from the Nairobi depot and $150 in depot fees, said 3 businessmen. Kenya owes Exim Bank $6.6 billion for the railway and other projects, about a tenth of its total national debt. The new line opened in 2017, running alongside a dilapidated track British colonialists built a century ago, which could have been rehabilitated and wasn't. It cut the Nairobi-Mombasa journey to 4 hours from 12 for passengers and to 8 hours from 24 for cargo. Wu, who's the Chinese ambassador, said China supported the directive requiring importers to use the railway. Wu Peng. That is a responsible and smart move by the Kenyan government. Daniel Nzeki, chairman of the Container Freight Stations Association of Kenya, said port security in Mombasa was still preventing trucks from picking up some cargo. It's a circus. I take you back to Ecclesiastes. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Z speaks about the end of vanity. This is a photograph of the Lunatic Express, Mombasa-Nairobi Railway, just outside the entrance to Savo East. And this is a photograph of the SGR running through the Nairobi National Park. The Nairobi All shares up 13.15%, and the NSE 20 is down 7%. And I thank you for stopping by.